she filed an official HOA complaint because I mowed too close to her hydrangeas. Then she planted evidence in my trash, accused me of lawn-based aggression, and held a PowerPoint meeting to declare my yard a threat zone, all because I said no when she asked to borrow my lawnmower. I thought I moved to the suburbs for peace. Instead, I moved into a HOA-themed psychological thriller. Whisper Creek looked like something straight off a real estate fantasy brochure. Symmetrical cul-de-sacs, pastel mailboxes, and lawns so perfectly trimmed you'd think they were Photoshop filters in real life. The kind of place where people wave with exactly 3 fingers, dog poop mysteriously disappears by sundown, and the HOA rules read more like scripture than suggestion. It was quiet, pristine, and deeply unsettling in that Stepford kind of way. I moved in with the optimism of a man freshly divorced and clinging to the idea that a quiet neighborhood would heal a noisy life. My name's Ethan Myers, 34, middle school STEM teacher. Bought a small 2-bedroom with a yard I could finally call mine. Just me, my books, and a secondhand lawnmower that I honestly thought would be the biggest drama of my summer. Then I met Karen. Karen Alwood introduced herself the same way you'd imagine someone summons a demon, with ceremony, clipboard, and judgment. She knocked on my door exactly at 7:02 a.m. and 2 days after I moved in. She wore a matching visor and vest set, both embroidered with HOA Whisper Creek VP, as if it were a military rank. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she chirped, handing me a folder thicker than some college textbooks. "Here's your compliance package. We run a tight ship." I thanked her, unsure whether I'd just joined a neighborhood or a mild cult. She scanned my front yard like it was a crime scene. "You planning to mow today?" she asked, eyeing the lawn with concern. "Probably this afternoon," I said. "I just need to gas up the mower." Her eyes lit up. "Perfect. Mind if I borrow it real quick? Just a touch-up behind my hydrangeas." I blinked. "I'm actually using it today." "Sorry." I expected her to nod and move on. Instead, her face tightened like a vacuum-sealed jar. "Oh, that's disappointing. Not very neighborly." And with that, she flounced off, muttering something about communal spirit. The next morning, I found an official-looking notice zip-tied to my doorknob. It was printed on heavy paper stock with the HOA logo and the words, "Community Infraction, Non-Participation in Equipment Sharing, Violation Code 14.8. I stared at it like it had grown legs. There was no such code in the welcome packet. I checked twice. It was either made up or repurposed from a Wi-Fi password. I emailed the HOA address listed on the notice. No reply. Then I asked my neighbor across the street, an elderly guy named Marvin with a tomato obsession, if he'd ever heard of 14.8. He laughed so hard he nearly dropped a gardening shear. "That's a Karen special," he said. "She makes up numbers when she doesn't get her way." Later that day, I saw Karen standing on her porch, arms crossed, staring at my house like I'd declared war. She had the same clipboard in hand, flipping through pages dramatically, occasionally jotting notes like she was building a case for the Supreme Court. I waved. She didn't. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a weird neighbor encounter. It was a declaration of HOA war. She'd taken my mower rejection personally, like I'd insulted her lineage or spit on a hydrangea. I didn't know it yet, but that one small act of boundary setting had triggered something in her. Something bureaucratic, something bold, something clipboard-powered, and it was coming for me. By dinner, 2 more neighbors had casually mentioned, "It's usually easier just to lend her things." One even whispered like we were in a spy thriller. She once borrowed a leaf blower and returned it with a warning label. That night, I sat on my porch, beer in hand, watching the sun dip below the HOA-mandated fencing, wondering if I had just made my biggest life mistake over a lawnmower. Then came the second notice, printed in red ink this time, accusing me of eroding communal cohesion. And that's when I knew I wasn't in Whisper Creek. I was in the kingdom of Karen, and the war had officially begun. The second violation notice arrived with the kind of smug precision usually reserved for jury summons. This one wasn't just zip-tied to my doorknob, it was laminated. Bold red letters screamed, "Failed to promote equipment synergy violation code 38.4C, followed by a handwritten note in gold Sharpie. Further, noncompliance may result in administrative review. There was no logo, no contact info, just a code, and a veiled threat signed K.A. like she was the HOA James Bond. I knew instantly that this wasn't official, it was personal. I checked the HOA handbook again. There was no 38.4C, there wasn't even a 38 section. Karen was now inventing laws like she was cooking up a recipe for vengeance pie. I brought the laminated nonsense to her porch the next day. "Hey, Karen," I said, trying to keep my tone neighborly, "I don't think this is a real code." She blinked at me like I'd said gravity was optional. "It's a supplemental guideline," she replied. "We operate dynamically here in Whisper Creek. The board has broad powers to interpret behavior that threatens cohesion." I stared at her. "So, made up?" Her smile thinned. "Look, Ethan, this community thrives on collaboration. When anyone chooses not to participate, it creates ripple effects. It undermines trust. It suggests rebellion." "I just didn't lend you my mower," I said. "Exactly," she snapped, tapping her clipboard. "That's how it starts." Then, as if quoting scripture, she added, "We can't allow the erosion of shared values." 3 days later, the flyers began. They weren't taped up. They were mailed, folded into neat thirds with a graphic on the front, a cartoon apple with a worm crawling out of it, and the words, "Don't let one bad neighbor spoil the bushel." Inside was a list titled Signs of Antisocial Conduct. Number 4 read, "Refusal to share yard equipment." Number 7, and I swear this is real, "Unverified mower usage." My name wasn't mentioned directly, but under the list was a pixelated silhouette that looked suspiciously like me holding a lawnmower, like it was a chainsaw. It didn't take long before neighbors started texting me photos and laughing emojis. Some were supportive, others not so much. Then came the community conduct map. Karen printed a large aerial layout of Whisper Creek and pinned it to the HOA bulletin board near the mailbox cluster. Red circles appeared around certain houses, including mine, marked "Needs Monitoring." A sticky note beneath it read, "Provisional Zones of Behavioral Inconsistency." It was as if she'd turned my front yard into a radioactive hotspot. I stood there in disbelief one afternoon when an elderly woman tiptoed past my driveway like I had a moat full of alligators. My name had been scribbled in red Sharpie on a side note, "Observation Priority, History of Tool Refusal." That night, someone anonymously left a rake on my porch with a Post-it, "Maybe start participating." I wanted to believe it was all some kind of bizarre HOA performance art piece, but Karen was dead serious. Every morning she paced the sidewalk with her clipboard like a suburban parole officer. Every evening another printout. My house became the epicenter of Karen's crusade against whatever imaginary virus she thought I was spreading. I wasn't just a neighbor anymore. I was a symbol, a threat, a silent protester in the dictatorship of decorative mulch. And somehow, in her warped HOA logic, my refusal to lend a mower had labeled me as a menace to community order. I was now officially the lawn rebel of Whisper Creek. It started with a spreadsheet taped to the HOA bulletin board. Just below Karen's "Unity Through Order" poster was a laminated chart titled Residential Lawn Risk Assessment. Each house was assigned a color-coded rating from green zone, flawless compliance, to brown, alert, potential deterioration. My property, naturally, had been slapped with a bright orange sticker labeled "Mowing Inconsistency, Possible Escalation." Next to it was a list of warning signs, including mismatched grass length, excessive crabgrass, and my personal favorite, borderline mulching behavior. There was even a footnote about intentional mower neglect, which, judging by the asterisk next to my address, was apparently a federal offense in Karen's personal HOA universe. She called the initiative Operation Grass Watch and insisted it was designed to maintain aesthetic harmony. It felt more like lawn-based McCarthyism. That week, she was everywhere, clipboard in hand, wearing polarized sunglasses that made her look like a mall security guard on ketamine. She'd walk slowly past houses, filming yards with her phone, zooming in on dandelions like they were signs of moral decay. Some neighbors found it hilarious. Others didn't. A few started trimming their lawns obsessively. One guy reportedly borrowed a golf course roller just to flatten a bump Karen had circled in chalk. But whispers started spreading. People were asking, "Is she allowed to record our houses?" A mom named Tessa caught Karen filming her kids playing hopscotch and stormed outside. "Do you work for NASA?" she barked. Karen, unfazed, just said, "Community footage for compliance records," and walked off like she was leaving a movie set. Then came the petitions. Karen circulated a flyer under the title Community Standards Leadership Feedback Survey. It looked official. HOA logo, legalese, and boxes to tick like strongly agree, neutral, and potential threat to cohesion. But the kicker was the final page, a blank signature of support form asking residents to confirm their desire for representational alignment. Translation, she was trying to get me stripped of my resident in good standing status, which, to be clear, isn't even a real thing. The form claimed I had repeatedly undermined shared values through individualistic behavior, which I think was HOA speak for owns his own tools. I confronted my neighbor Brad, who said, "Yeah, she said it was a neighborhood feedback form. I didn't know it was about you. I just signed to make her go away." Classic Karen bait and switch. At this point, I stopped playing defense. I installed a ring cam on my front porch, quietly, with no announcement. Within days, it paid off. One morning, I received another violation note taped aggressively to my recycling bin. Visible non-recyclables, environmental breach, fine $75.00. I stared at the enclosed photo, an over-zoomed shot of a black garbage bag where apparently a rogue plastic fork was poking through the top. Here's the kicker. I hadn't taken the trash out yet. I checked the ring footage. There she was, Karen, 11:43 p.m., hoodie on, creeping into my side yard holding what looked like a grocery bag. She crouched, checked over both shoulders, and slipped something into my bin like she was planting evidence on a crime scene. Then she scurried off like a suburban raccoon with a grudge. I saved the footage, labeled the file Karen evidence _trash plant _final V2MP4, and sent it to the HOA group thread with the caption, "This is what community looks like now." The reactions were instant. Some laughed, some gasped. One neighbor replied, "She did the same thing with my Halloween candy wrappers." The video hit the neighborhood like a weed in a rose garden. Karen, of course, claimed the footage was edited and accused me of technological manipulation, but the damage was done. My bin had become the battleground, and thanks to $130.00 camera and Karen's Oscar-worthy performance, people were finally starting to ask, just how far was this woman willing to go over a mower? The official-looking envelope was taped directly to my garage, centered, sealed with some kind of glittery HOA sticker like it had come from a bedazzled court of law. Inside, a fine notice for $185.00. The charge? Improper disposal of environmentally hazardous materials. The offense? A low-resolution photograph of my trash bin zoomed in so hard the pixels looked like a Minecraft screenshot. In the grainy mess, a white object barely peeked through the black plastic. Supposedly a styrofoam container, non-biodegradable, the citation read, willful contamination of community waste stream. It ended with a signature, K.A. Environmental Oversight Liaison, self-appointed. I stared at the paper, blinking like I'd just been told I owed the government money for breathing irregularly. I hadn't thrown anything away that day. In fact, I'd purposely skipped trash duty after Karen's last drama because I didn't feel like having my leftovers analyzed like a crime scene. That's when Ava, my next-door neighbor and self-declared chaos enjoyer, walked up, holding an iced coffee, and said casually, "Hey, weird question. Do you want to see something sketchy?" She pulled out her phone and showed me a blurry shot she'd taken late the night before. Karen, wearing a reflective vest for some reason, walking across my driveway with what looked like a takeout bag in hand. "She dropped it in your bin and bolted," Ava said. "I thought she was pranking you again. Didn't know she'd charge you for it." Armed with her photo and my own ring cam footage, I crafted a group email to the entire HOA board and CC'd half the neighborhood. Subject line, Trashgate, a cautionary tale. Attached was the video file, a close-up still of Karen mid-dump, and the original $185.00 fine for dramatic effect. The body of the email simply read, "Evidence suggests I am being billed for garbage I didn't generate. Unless we're now holding people accountable for littering by proximity, I'd like this revoked." Within minutes, my inbox lit up like a Black Friday sale. Responses ranged from "holy crap" to "I knew she was shady" to a simple WTF. Someone replied with a meme of Karen labeled bin. Karen's response? Denial. Of course, she claimed the footage had been deep-faked and insisted she'd never even touched my trash. "I only observed," she wrote, like she was describing a wildlife documentary. Perhaps someone else used my likeness to frame me. Someone else? What, her evil twin? She then doubled down in the weirdest way possible. She taped a new violation to my mailbox, not printed, handwritten in pink glitter pen. Failure to maintain composure during community inquiry, $45.00. Optional anger management seminar available. It was taped under a Lisa Frank unicorn sticker and smelled faintly of lavender. My driveway looked like a child's birthday card with legal threats. That was the moment the community started to truly fracture. Half the block now saw Karen as a self-declared trash detective spiraling into cosplay villainy. The other half, mostly retirees who just wanted their shrubs left alone, started pretending not to know her. Marvin next door, formerly neutral, sent me a text. "We're Team Mower now, just say the word." And while I appreciated the support, I also knew something deeper was shifting. This wasn't just about HOA abuse anymore. Karen wasn't policing garbage. She was manufacturing it, and in a neighborhood where lawn height mattered more than morality, that made her the most dangerous thing of all. A petty tyrant with a glue gun and no oversight. It started with a GIF, a looping 5-second clip of Karen sneaking up to my trash bin under the cover of darkness. Paused at the moment, she looked both ways like a cartoon burglar with the caption, "Stealth level, HOA boss." Within hours, the neighborhood group chat lit up like a Christmas tree on caffeine. Marvin posted a meme of Karen holding a flashlight and clipboard, photoshopped into a Call of Duty cover with the title, Operation Trash. Ava followed up with a TikTok remix of the ring footage set to the Mission Impossible theme, complete with slow zoom-ins and dramatic dun-duns. Even Brad, who once accidentally called her ma'am and got a 3-paragraph email about ageist assumptions, sent in a sticker pack labeled Karen Codes, the unauthorized violations. And then Karen lost it. 2 days after the mean frenzy reached peak ridiculousness, 2 police cruisers rolled into Whisper Creek, like they were responding to a hostage situation. Lights on, windows down, and out stepped 2 very confused officers who looked like they were hoping this was a wrong address. Karen emerged from her front porch, mascara smudged like she'd been preparing for a courtroom drama, screaming, "There he is! That's the man who threatened me with motorized equipment." The taller officer blinked at me, standing there in gym shorts, holding a cup of iced coffee and my very much turned-off lawnmower. "Ma'am," he asked slowly, "are you saying he threatened you with the lawnmower?" Karen, voice trembling like she'd just survived a leaf-blowing incident, nodded. "He revved it aggressively toward my fence." The younger cop tried not to laugh. "Was the mower running?" "Not at the time," she admitted, then immediately added, "but it has been, repeatedly, near my perimeter with hostility." I pointed to my porch camera. "I have footage," I said, already pulling it up. The video showed me calmly starting the mower, waving to Karen, who stood stone-faced on her driveway like a tax auditor on Judgment Day. The officer watched, nodded once, and said, "Well, ma'am, what we're seeing here is yard work." Karen's face contorted. "He's provoking me with it. It's become a symbol of rebellion." The older officer leaned in. "You want us to confiscate his lawnmower?" "Yes," she snapped, "for the safety of the community." There was a long, awkward pause. Then the younger cop said, "Well, make a note," and handed me a card. "If she calls again, let us know. We're keeping a file." Karen stormed off, yelling about public endangerment via landscaping, and I realized this wasn't HOA enforcement, it was theater. Bad, overacted theater with real-life implications. So I did what any rational person does when the neighborhood villain tries to get your mower arrested. I lawyered up. Enter Jasmine Cruz. Attorney, local legend, and absolute buzzsaw on heels, a friend of a friend recommended her as someone who eats HOA board members for breakfast. She arrived the next afternoon with a briefcase full of cease and desist templates and a voice so calm it could intimidate a fire. After watching the videos, Jasmine took off her glasses, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "This isn't just a nuisance. This is targeted harassment. You're going to like what comes next." Her plan hit Karen where it hurt, the fake authority. Jasmine specialized in exposing rogue HOA officials who overstepped, overcharged, and made up rules on the fly. She drafted a formal demand letter addressed to Karen, the HOA board, and, just for fun, the county compliance office. The subject line, unauthorized enforcement practices and community defamation. It cited every made-up code Karen had used, noted her unauthorized trash fines, her abuse of emergency services, and even referenced her recent attempted mower seizure. It was sharp, clean, and devastatingly polite. The same way a guillotine is quiet right before it drops. When Jasmine sent the letter, she didn't just email it. She posted a hard copy on the HOA bulletin board, sealed in a plastic sleeve with a neon sticky note for transparency. Whisper Creek hadn't seen this much excitement since someone painted their mailbox purple in 2014, but this wasn't just drama anymore. This was the first real crack in Karen's kingdom. And trust me, the clipboard queen felt it. Karen's clipboard empire started to crack not with a bang, but with a letter. Jasmine, as promised, didn't just threaten legal action, she delivered it like a velvet hammer. Her cease and desist packet was professionally bound, footnoted, and wrapped in the kind of cold courtesy that said, "I went to law school for this exact moment." The final page contained a formal demand, full transparency on all HOA financial activities involving Karen Elwood for the past 18 months. "We're going to pop the hood on this HOA Ferrari," Jasmine said flatly, "and I'll guarantee there's a hamster running the engine." The letter was sent via email, certified mail, and hand-delivered to the HOA office, a converted storage shed behind the community pool, guarded by 3 sun-faded flamingos and a very startled Todd, the HOA president. Enter Brian Chu, quiet, polite, and a former HOA treasurer who had apparently fled Whisper Creek a year ago after what he cryptically called the hydrangea incident. Jasmine contacted him through a mutual friend and asked if he'd be willing to help review the budget. What she didn't know was that Brian now worked for the city finance department and had a personal hobby of dismantling messy bookkeeping for fun. When Jasmine showed him the HOA's last 3 quarterly expense reports, his eyebrows did a slow rise that would have made Spock proud. "This isn't a budget," he said. "This is a wish list on tax paper." Within 2 hours, Brian found 3 major red flags, one of which included a $1,700.00 line item labeled Spiritual Wellness Advisory paid in advance. It got worse. Karen had apparently used HOA funds to order customized clipboard decals from Etsy, item Queen of Codes, spent $843.00 on hydration therapy at a spa called Zinfandel, and reimbursed herself $212.00 for what she described as emergency motivational cupcakes. The most jaw-dropping item, a $900.00 charge to someone listed as community morale consultant, who turned out to be her college roommate, Jessica, last seen yelling at a Starbucks barista over the milk-to-foam ratio. Jasmine laid everything out like a prosecutor preparing for trial. "None of this," she said, tapping the spreadsheet, "is remotely legal." Todd, looking paler by the minute, muttered, "She told us those were community development investments." And then came the binder. Or rather, the binder copies. Karen, in her infinite micromanagement, had apparently taken it upon herself to create backups of all HOA voting records. Handwritten logs, sign-in sheets, tallied results. But Jasmine, naturally skeptical of handwriting that looked suspiciously uniform, asked for the originals. Todd hesitated. "She told me she archived the originals in her garage safe." Jasmine stared at him. "A safe?" Todd nodded, behind a wall-mounted quote that says, "Order is beauty." Brian leaned in and said, "I'm going to vomit." But the real kicker was this. Among the copies was a re-election form showing Karen's continuation as VP, signed not by the board, but by Karen herself, twice, once in cursive, once in block letters. And next to the president's signature line was a name, Daniel Roy. Jasmine paused. "Who's that?" Todd blinked. "He was HOA president 3 years ago. He moved to Tampa." Karen had forged signatures to remain in power. The re-election was fake, the financial records were cooked, and now there was a digital trail pointing directly to her desktop folder, labeled HOA_strategy_masterplan. Jasmine cracked a smile for the first time that week. "She's not just power hungry," she said. "She's bold and sloppy." Brian added, "The worst kind." That night, Jasmine compiled a formal complaint and flagged it to the County HOA Ethics Division. But before they could act, something else surfaced. An anonymous tip that Karen had staged a supplemental board vote using printed ballots, and several of those ballots, when cross-checked, had belonged to former residents, and one to a dog. Whisper Creek wasn't just on fire anymore, it was about to blow the lid off Karen's HOA fiefdom. The emergency HOA meeting took place on a Sunday afternoon under a rented pop-up canopy in the community park because, as Jasmine so eloquently put it, sunlight disinfects. Folding chairs filled quickly, people brought popcorn, someone even wheeled in a speaker and played low-volume dramatic instrumental music, like we were waiting for a court TV segment to begin. Jasmine walked up with a rolling suitcase, clicked it open, and pulled out the binder, labeled in large block letters, Karen's Greatest Hits, a documentary of delusion. Brian followed, holding laminated spreadsheets and a manila envelope labeled confidential, just to look official. Todd, the once doormat HOA president, stood near the mic like he'd just grown a spine and wasn't sure how to use it. Jasmine didn't speak with anger. She spoke like someone reading out the fine print of karma. She laid out every misused dollar, every forged signature, every creative morale invoice. The crowd gasped in stages, especially at the cupcake reimbursements, and the consultant who turned out to be Karen's spa buddy. But nothing prepared them for the surveillance section. Jasmine pulled up a PowerPoint slide, yes, a full-blown slideshow titled Operation Watch Grab. The photos started with harmless spots: a fake rock in Ava's yard, a suspiciously well-positioned wind chime at Brad's porch. Then it escalated. A teddy bear left on a child's swing set with a glint of glass in one eye. A flower pot outside Marvin's kitchen window with a black lens peeking through the soil. And finally, Karen's own mailbox, retrofitted with a motion-activated minicam, pointed directly across the street. Ethan raised his hand. I guess I was right to put my trash out after midnight. By the time Jasmine opened the floor, the HOA crowd wasn't just shocked, they were furious. Linda from Elm Street stood up and declared, "She recorded my grandkids. That's not oversight, that's perversion." Someone else yelled, "She tracked my recycling schedule." Todd, clearing his throat like he meant business for once, called for a formal vote of no confidence. The ballots were real this time, printed with watermark ink and collected in a sealed box. Unanimous, Karen Alwood was officially stripped of all HOA authority. She was barred from attending meetings, distributing materials, or interacting with board decisions in any capacity. Jasmine handed Todd an official letter of notification, typed, signed, and notarized. Also, she added, "Our complaint has been filed with the County Ethics Committee and Civil Surveillance Division. Expect a formal investigation." A murmur of applause turned into a standing ovation. But then came the twist. After the chaos died down and people started milling around, Todd approached Ethan. "Hey, man, we'd love for you to join the new board. You've got support. People respect you. You kept your cool." Ethan, still sitting in the back, leaned forward and smiled faintly. "Todd, I appreciate it. But I didn't move here to play politics. I moved here to mow my lawn in peace." He nodded towards driveway. "My mower's got enough power for grass, not egos." The crowd laughed, cheered, and maybe for the first time in HOA history, respected someone more for saying no. Jasmine smiled like a proud big sister. "He's the lawn whisperer, not the lawn warrior," she joked. As the sun dipped behind Whisper Creek's surgically trimmed trees, the binder was returned to its case. Karen, meanwhile, had locked herself inside her house, blinds drawn, cameras unplugged. Her reign of clipboards and compost fines had finally come to an end, not with a dramatic gavel or lawsuit, but with the community together simply saying, "Enough." And while Ethan didn't claim a seat on the new board, he claimed something far better: his lawn, his peace, and most importantly, his ring cam set to public. Because if Karen ever made a comeback, Whisper Creek would be watching. 3 weeks after Karen's clipboard was officially retired, Whisper Creek did something no HOA manual had ever accounted for. We threw a party, not a potluck, not a gardening seminar, a real unapologetic block party. There were tacos, there was live music, there was a bounce house inexplicably shaped like a flamingo wearing sunglasses, and in the middle of the celebration, in front of the freshly mulched entrance to the community park, stood the newly installed bench of justice. Custom built, weatherproof, oak with iron legs. A small bronze plaque glimmered under the afternoon sun, reading, "Think before you clipboard." Just beneath it, in smaller print, "In memory of OCHA overreach and grass-based oppression." The bench was funded using the leftover HOA beautification budget, ironically the same pool Karen had once tried to spend on aromatherapy diffusers and team-building cupcakes. This time, the community voted unanimously. Jasmine, of course, handled the paperwork. Todd gave a speech that mostly consisted of "We're not doing that again." And Brian handed out laminated flyers titled, "How to Spot a Rogue HOA Officer. Hint, glitter pins are a red flag." And then came the most satisfying moment of all. They brought out a golden lawnmower, not solid gold. Obviously, this wasn't Dubai, but spray painted, tastefully bedazzled with a small mounted plaque that read, "The Last Mow Down in honor of Ethan Myers." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I chose to mow a celebratory strip of grass instead. People clapped. One woman wiped away a tear. Marvin called it the most peaceful revolution he'd ever witnessed. Karen, of course, did not attend. Her house went up for sale, quietly. No open house, no goodbye notes, not even a suspicious clipboard-shaped shadow in the window. But she couldn't resist one last word. On the morning of her move, someone spotted a piece of paper duct taped to the utility pole near the community bulletin board. Typed in Comic Sans, it read, "I tried to bring structure. You chose chaos. Good luck with your lawns." It was signed, of course, KKA. Ava, never one to let a cringe moment go unmemed, replaced it within the hour with a laminated photo. Karen, mid-scream from the 911 Mower call, photoshopped holding a weed whacker like a bazooka. The caption, "Mower Lord down." That stayed up for 2 weeks. Just when we thought peace had returned, a screenshot popped up in the group chat. A user on a forum for a neighborhood 2 towns over, Sycamore Hollow, had posted, "New resident here. Woman introduced herself with a clipboard and a petition to regulate mailbox colors. Says she used to work in community development. Her name's Karen. Is this normal?" The thread exploded. Linda sent them the HOA complaint dossier. Owen linked them to Jasmine's TEDx talk on weaponized bureaucracy in the American suburb. Someone from their HOA sent back a thank you gift basket labeled "Preventative Measures." Karen, it seemed, was trying for a comeback. Karen, too. New zip code, same mission. Clipboard recharged. But here in Whisper Creek, things were different now. The bylaws had been revised, the community more alert. There was even an unofficial neighborhood motto printed on magnets and stuck on fridge doors across the block. "Not all who clipboard are leaders." The bench became a local landmark. Teenagers sat on it to gossip. Retirees sipped coffee while debating mulch strategies. Kids climbed it like a jungle gym. And every now and then someone would pat the armrest and say, "She really thought she could fine us into submission." The lawnmower sat proudly in the HOA office next to the bylaws, forever reminding us that sometimes the line between order and tyranny is measured in inches of grass. One evening, I found myself on that bench. Quiet sunset, crickets tuning up. Ava walked by with her dog, nodded toward the mower display, and said, "You know, it kind of suits you." I grinned. "I didn't choose the mow life. The mow life chose me." She groaned, laughed, and kept walking. And in that peaceful, ridiculous moment, I realized we weren't just a neighborhood anymore. We were survivors of the great clipboard crusade, and we'd earned our peace. 1 inch at a time. Sometimes the most ridiculous wars are the ones fought over the smallest things, like lawn mowers, trash bags, and imaginary HOA codes. But in those absurd battles, something real gets revealed. How far people will go to protect their boundaries, their peace, and each other. Ethan didn't win because he yelled the loudest. He won because he stood his ground with logic, humor, and receipts. Karen's fall wasn't just karma. It was a reminder that power without accountability turns into parody. So whether you're in a cul-de-sac or a condo, remember, not every clipboard comes with credibility, and not every rule deserves respect. If you've ever dealt with a Karen, a rogue HOA, or just love a good underdog story, drop a comment below. Tell us your wildest suburban drama. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tales where petty meets poetic justice. This is Whisper Creek signing off.